everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello. Welcome to my February reading wrap up. I'm hopefully gonna go through this rapid fire.
Honey,
I know I said that a lot in these, but
you've got a big storm coming.
most of these books were featured in, or are going to be featured in, my Friends Pick My TBR monthly vlog that will be hopefully going up next week. I do have one more book to finish for that video, but all my thoughts and all my ponderings and reactions will be mostly in that video, but we're gonna go through it. I got my trusty bullet journal here. I got my stack of books in front of me. Let's talk about February. So February, so far, I have read 12 books. Today is February 29th, and I have plans to finish Eldest tonight. Will I? Who knows, because I have like 7 hours left on the audiobook. Can't listen to it any faster. I have this much left to read, so it's very possible that I'll finish it in March. But anyways, let's dive in. Let's see where we will start. I have not calculated any of the pages read or anything, so I'm very behind. Let me grab my computer. I feel like I'm just behind today. Lots of stuff was going on at work, so I apologize. Storygraph tells me for the month of February, I read 12 books, as I said, 4,863 pages so far. I read 1 nonfiction and 11 fiction books, and I believe the genres, oh gosh, okay. That's usually what I gather. So we have 5 official fantasy books. We have 3 sci-fi books, 3 like literary fiction or mystery or horror or whatever, just more literary fiction stuff. And one of those could be considered a horror. One of those could be, then that same book could be considered a fantasy as well. So who the hell knows? We just read across a bunch of genres this month. And for ratings, we have everything from 2 DNFs, 1 2-star, 2 3-stars, 2 3.5 stars, 2 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 2 5 stars. So it was a great month all around. I'm very happy with the reading that went down. So because it was my Friends Pick My TBR month, we're just gonna quickly go through those books first, shall we? First up, I read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming, which I ended up giving 3 stars. I thought this was cute, but didn't really give me anything more than that. This is a very lighthearted, steamy, romantic fantasy, like a rom-com fantasy kind of a thing, that follows Sin, our main character, who ends up getting roped into doing a quest with a demon daddy, essentially. Very sexy, very steamy, very fun, but kind of, you know. I skimmed over the plot because the plot didn't really matter. It was just fine for me. Then I ended up picking up Bricks and Mortality by Anne Granger, which I've since decided to unhaul because this was a super boring mystery that just is not worth my time. All I remember about this one is that all of the characters felt so two-dimensional. Some of them felt absolutely useless to be in this book at all. This is about a town kind of coming to terms with an old abandoned house being set on fire, and there was a corpse found in it, but nobody really seemed to care all that much. There was no real connections to anything going on, and the ending was just so lackluster, so I gave this 2 stars. Then I picked up The Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. This I absolutely adored. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was just so genuinely amazing. Loved it. This is a really atmospheric historical horror romance fantasy. I think that's the order that you could describe the genres for this one in. This book is about Nena and Nestor. Something attacked Nena about 9 years ago, and Nestor believed her to be dead, which caused him to run away, essentially. She was not dead. She was very much not dead, just very badly injured. And 9 years later, this war is happening, and that brings Nestor back home, and he realizes that the girl he loves is not dead. He deeply, deeply, deeply loves her, and it's this romance, kind of like best friends to strangers to animosity, bantery, something to lovers. It was just genuinely so lovely. I love this so much. At the same time as there are vampires and a war happening. It's very atmospheric. I fucking love this so much. Then I picked up Where Peace is Lost by Valerie Valdez. This is a standalone sci-fi novel by the author of the Chilling Effect trilogy, which is one of my favorite sci-fi trilogies of all time. I expected this to kind of follow that vibe and be a lot of fun to read. This was very much not a lot of fun to read. It was kind of lackluster and not sad, but just kind of monotone the whole way through. It just didn't have the same tone that I was expecting from the Chilling Effect trilogy, which that's my fault. It's not Valerie Valdez's fault. That is my fault to expect a tone going into a book. But this follows Kel, who lost everything 5 years ago. And she is a refugee in this really far off part of the solar system. She's got a friend there, but doesn't really do much, doesn't really cause a stir because she doesn't want to bring danger to the people around her. But one day, of course, danger kind of comes to her. There's this rogue war machine on the path to this city causing destruction. Two strangers come to town, and Kel's friend Luna decides to offer their own like guidemanship, I guess, to these two strangers. Kel gets roped in as an extra guard. It's a whole thing, you know. There's also a romance in here that was kind of lackluster to me, but it was fine. I give it 3.5 stars. Then I picked up A River Enchanted for My Friends Pick My TBR video. This was definitely very enchanting. I know. Pun intended. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I think it was very well written and the story was beautiful, and Rebecca Ross's writing is gorgeous, but I do think there are problems with the plot, a little bit clunky in places, and it just wasn't like an all-time favorite, so 4 stars. This follows Jack, who is a bard that has been studying away from home for like 10 years. He gets called back home by his laird, who he assumes his laird, but it was actually his laird's daughter, who is also Jack's like childhood best friend turned nemesis. She calls him back to help the town basically find out what happened to all these missing girls, and it has to do with spirits and magic and that kind of stuff. I do really recommend this one though. It was very good. For the video, I also picked up Practical Potions and Premeditated Murder by Ren Jones. This is a little indie, cozy fantasy mystery book that follows Sella, our main character, who is a certified kitchen witch and a little bit of an outcast in her town that she has just moved back to take over her mom's witchy shop. She's trying to gain the trust of everyone, of all the townsfolk around her. And one day she wakes up and there's a ghost standing in the middle of her living room asking her to help solve her murder. The best character in this book is BG the cat. I thought that this was okay. I found some of the characters really lackluster and not very well thought out, but some of them were also very lovely. I also missed a lot of the world building to make this place more tangible, and there was not enough connection or knowledge about who ended up being the murderer and why they ended up being the murderer for it to really be satisfying for me. So I ended up giving this one only 3 stars, but it was still just fine. And it's very cute and very cozy. So like, what else could you want? Then I ended up picking up The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. I left it on my shelves by accident. This was my own addition to the My Friends Pick My TBR video because there were 9 books picked for My Friends Pick My TBR, and I wanted to make it into an even number because I like even numbers a lot better. And so I pulled this pick off of a chart that I had my friends do back in December of last year. I had them pick 12 books off of my physical TBR for me to read throughout the year. So I have my 12 books my friends have picked. So I picked this one off of it because I figured why not? And A River Enchanted was also from it, but my friend Cass, who picked that book, I did not know that. But The 100,000 Kingdoms was added onto it to make it an even 10. And I think this is my favorite book of the month. I fucking love this so much. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I don't even know if I can describe this book properly without spoiling everything and without rambling on for like 10 minutes. But okay, so this follows Yena, who is called to her kingdom, summoned to her kingdom by the king, who is her grandfather. And she is told there that she is one of 3 heirs to the throne. She's being claimed as one of the heirs. And it ends up being this kind of gamified, there's a lot of political reasons why she's been claimed as heir because only one heir can remain standing by this choosing day thing, or on this choosing day. As Yena is there, she is discovering stuff about her mother who passed away mysteriously 4 months ago, and she's also coming to contact with 4 gods who are chained into mortal bodies as punishment for something. The world building in here is absolutely stunning. I love that this book exists. This is N.K. Jemisin's debut, and you'll probably have seen me screaming about this in my latest vlog, my latest weekend vlog, because I couldn't put this down. I read this in one sitting in like 3.5, 4 hours. I could not put this fairly big. It's not that big. This is like an average size fantasy book. This is like 412-ish page fantasy book. Couldn't put it down. I could not stop reading. It was fabulous. I did not know where anything was going at any point in time. N.K. Jemisin's knack with her narrative, interesting layering of telling a story that she has from the Broken Earth trilogy with the 5th season. came into play in this again with a new kind of like, she plays with narrative and I love it so much. I loved this. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. I believe that was it that I actually fully read all the way through for the My Friends Pick My TBR video, but the other two that I tried to read and didn't end up finishing were these two books. We have The Regrets by Amy Bonifants and The Wren Hunt by Mary Watson. Both of these were DNFs. The Regrets because it was pompous and awful, and The Wren Hunt because this tried so hard to be so many things and yet there wasn't a proper plot at all. I got halfway through this one and about 100 pages through this one. Both of them were DNFs and unhauls. So they're going to be unhauled alongside the Anne Granger book, Unhauls of the Month. To prep for one of the books in the one book that is going to be carried into March for the My Friends Pick My TBR, I had to reread a couple books. So that book that my friend Hannah picked for My Friends Pick My TBR was Brysinger by Christopher Paolini. And to read this, my brain was like, you need to reread Aragon and Eldest because it has been so many years since you've read them, you don't remember a damn thing. So I decided to do a series video for this series. And so I reread Aragon this month. And when I originally read it, I rated it 5 stars just on vibes. But now that I'm a more critical reader, I rate this about 4 stars. It was just so enjoyable. 5 stars in enjoyment, but 4 stars as a book. I think it's a fantastic read and just something that I will be comfort reading over and over and over again. And I cannot wait to share this with my kids one day when I have kids. Like, this is just genuinely such a lovely book. It follows a young boy who finds a stone, a mysterious stone, when he's hunting in what is called the Spine, which is thought to be pretty dangerous part of the mountains kind of near his small town of Carvajal. And this stone he tries to sell, but no one will really take it because no one likes the Spine. Ends up being a dragon named Saphira, and because of some circumstances around the stone that lead to his uncle's death by these two mysterious beings called the Razak, Aragon goes on a journey with the storyteller Brom to come and find revenge on this. And it kicks off this incredibly epic series. So I reread Aragon this month and I am currently, as I said at the beginning of this video, like 40% of the way through Eldest, and I would love to finish this month too, but this is next on the docket for that anyways. And I need to finish this before I can go into book 3, which was picked for the My Friends Pick My TBR video. And then after this, I will be reading also Inheritance as well because I'm doing this for a series video, a special edition one because it's 4 books long and I had to reread 2 books to get to the new stuff. But anyways, loved that so much. And I think that's everything for the My Friends Pick My TBR video that I read. But between all of that, of course, I had other things that I read. So this month, right away at the beginning, I really desperately wanted to read Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjabanya. And I'm so glad that I did because this was the second 5-star of the year, first 5-star of February. This is so fucking fabulous. I absolutely adored it. In this world, this is a dystopian society where America's prison system has become privatized and gamified. Prisoners in this world have a chance to fight to the death, to become part of this televised, monetized game for their freedom. Once they enter into the system, they have to literally live out the tenure of however many years or however many games that they have to go through to thus gain their freedom. And each of these games, they have a 50-50 chance on dying because it's a fight to the death. It's a very interesting look at justice and what makes a criminal, and empathy and empathizing with these people who are deeply troubled individuals and who have committed these crimes. It's a very interesting look at how dystopian the system is even today. What really terrifies me about dystopian fiction is how real it is and how easy we can get to this. I am Canadian, so I don't know much about the American prison system itself. I don't even know much about the Canadian prison system because we're just never taught about that in school. So I don't know how real a lot of this is. I loved this. So this book focuses mainly, it's got a really big cast of characters and it plays with narrative in a very interesting way, which I absolutely loved. But this one focuses mainly on Thurwar and Stax, who are queer as well. They love each other very deeply and have come together in the past like 3 years as Thurwar, who at the beginning of this basically kills the last, well, there's a name for it. It's been so long. It's not a gladiator, but like top level person. If she won that fight against Third War, she would have been free kind of level. Like, she is a centurion almost. I don't know what else to call her. But Third War becomes that, and she's on her last stretch of a few weeks of being part of this before she is able to go free. Stax is coming up behind her very quickly on that. They're part of the same link. So in the chain gang, there are different kind of links and teams essentially that then fight against other links. It's a little complicated to explain in a video, but so Third War and Stax are the main focus of this as Third War's date is approaching, essentially, what her last fights. It's her last 2 or 3 fights in this book. She is so close to freedom. So it's this kind of culmination of what freedom really would be for someone like this. And is freedom even possible? Can you escape the system? It is so incredibly cool. Like, if you really enjoyed the Hunger Games, read this because it is so much better. Like, it is just such a fascinating look at the world and justice and empathy and all this kind of... I fucking loved this. Literally, right after reading that book, I read Angela Davis's Freedom is a Constant Struggle, which is my nonfiction pick of the month. What a book to choose to read after Chain Gang All-Stars. This is centered around state violence and oppression throughout history, and also talks about Black feminism, intersectionality, and prison abolitionism for today's struggles. This was published back in 2016 though, so it's focusing very heavily on like 2013, 2014. So I would be actually really interested to see Angela Davis's thoughts on today's world if she was to revisit some of the topics discussed in this book, because this book is also a kind of compendium of a bunch of different interviews, essays, and speeches that Angela has given. So there's quite a bit of repetition in this, and like the topics just brought up again and again and again. But I think that was very good to do, and I listened to this on audiobooks, so having those speeches near the end kind of discuss the same things over and over really just kind of set the points home. And I think the way that Angela discusses these problems in each one of her speeches is just incredible and really works well for me. But this audiobook didn't work fantastically for me because the beginning opens up with an interview, someone actually interviewing Angela, but Angela is voicing the entire audiobook herself, and I don't know what she was doing in those interview portions, but she was pausing very unnaturally, and I couldn't tell what were the questions and what were her answers. Like, I almost wish that they had someone come in and voice just the questions to ask Angela, and then Angela answer them, because I didn't like the interview sections. They were so hard for me to follow. And then the essays were a little better, but the best parts were her speeches because it was more natural to her, the way that she spoke, and it was a lot more engaging for me. But yeah, I don't rate my nonfiction though. So there you go. The last 2 books that I have read this month were a book club pick and then a last minute decision yesterday to round out the pages in my bullet journal, because otherwise this page was going to be left blank before we go into March's spread. So I needed to add another book there. So I did. I just read one really quickly over audiobook. But before that, I ended up reading Penance by Eliza Clark, which is a book club pick for myself and my friends this month in our Weird Woman focused book club. And this was so interesting. This book situates us in a fictional journalist's work. A book that a fictional journalist is putting together and writing. So very interesting frame narrative with this one, because it's Eliza Clark writing a story about a fictional journalist writing a story about this murder, absolutely brutal torture and murder of a teenage girl by 3 other teenage girls in a very small, not very well-known English town. We're reading through this fictional journalist's thoughts about these girls and their lives and the town that they grew up in, and it's framed in such an interesting way because we know immediately who did it and who was the victim from the first chapter. So you know who did it. It's just the why and the lead up to it, because as is mentioned at the beginning here, the girls' accounts up to a certain part match, but then from that part on do not match at all. They are not corroborate, like their story does not match across these 3 girls. They're all blaming each other. They're all like, nothing is set in stone. No one knows exactly what happened that night or why they killed this girl. It is a brutal murder. Unreal what they did to her. And honestly, this book is such an interesting examination on so many different things. It's an interesting examination on true crime specifically and the fad it has become with all the podcasts and the documentaries and all this kind of stuff, and the problematic elements of that. I will be entirely honest, I used to listen religiously to true crime podcasts. I find them so fascinating. I am also a Dateline girly, love watching Dateline. I don't know what it is about watching cases dramatized like that. It just gets me. I love it so much, but I know how problematic it is, so I've been trying to stop and just not listening to podcasts like that anymore and what have you. But reading this just really shone a light on how twisted it can be being in this fandom, quote unquote. And it is also a look at the parasocial relationship between young teenage girls and the fandom aspect of certain murderers. So, you've heard about people, women, men, people of all genders, just like amassing to a creepy level of love for people who are committed murderers and serial killers, like the Charles Manson effect. And the Night Stalker, I remember watching that Netflix documentary, but like the way that people would flock to the courtroom and just fawn over this man who murdered people, that level of fandom. Because in here, one of the girls, actually a fair number of the girls involved in this are part of that like true crime culture. And there ends up being a fascination for one of them around, well, not even fascination, like full obsession, romanticization of two school shooters from America. So look up trigger warnings for the content in this book because it is brutal, the amount of stuff that is brought up. Bullying, sexual harassment, sexual assault, school shooting, murder, obviously, gore, all of it, okay? So many different topics in here that were brought up and very well discussed, but also so intense. This book, out of all the books I have ever read, caused me the most visceral emotions that I have ever had. I could not put this book down. I made a cup of tea the other night and I was like, I'm gonna start reading Penance. We'll see how far I get. I couldn't put this down. I was reading until 2 a.m. and I finished this book. I forgot I made tea. I only got halfway through it. I forgot I made it. I was so sucked in by this and I was so genuinely sick to my stomach in so many parts because the way that this is framed, like the two of the girls in here who committed the murder were painted in such a sympathetic light and in a way of like describing growing up as a girl and girlhood itself. It was disturbing to me how much I connected with these girls and some of their experiences as little kids. It was so much. But then you get to the end of this book and everything is cast in a slightly different light. Go into this with no spoilers, but look up trigger warnings, of course. Go into this with no spoilers as to like the whole picture of this book because it is so fascinating what Eliza Clark has painted here and done with this book. Again, I finished this book a ball of rage. Like I went through this book just feeling so many different emotions, being like, okay, like why are we including this part of this? This has nothing to do with the girls or the case. Like the fictional journalist was including a lot of stuff in his book that just wasn't pertinent in my mind. So it there were parts of it I was just like, why? But I couldn't put it down. Like it was so gripping the entire way through. And then I would go through moments of being like, why am I empathizing with a murderer right now? To just being so disgusted at what people were doing in this book and what people did. And then just being like so viscerally like, I almost don't want to look. Like it gave me the feeling that when I was reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, I couldn't look away. I was sick to my stomach. It was like watching a car crash. This was like watching a murder happen in real life. It also felt like I was watching a true crime documentary. Like, I don't know what about this book is a thing. This book was just so good, okay? I'm so excited to talk about this with my friends. It's gonna be so good. Anyways, this is 4.5 stars. Not quite 5 stars because I cannot call this a favorite book. It disturbed me too much. But definitely so good and definitely worth your time if you're thinking about picking this one up. It's such a mindfuck. And then last book that I read this month was Network Effect. Almost hit my face with this. That's so funny. By Martha Wells. This is book 5 in the Murderbot series. This is the first full-length standalone novel in the series, but it's not really a standalone because you need to read everything else before you need to read this. So it was fine. I was listening to this yesterday as I was going about my day and like having like a romantic evening with myself in a bookstore, just having a moment to myself, walking through the stacks, listening to the audiobook. I was having a good time, but the book itself just wasn't doing anything for me. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I don't really know if it hit what I wanted it to hit. And I think this is kind of an interesting reflection on the entire Murderbot series for me so far. I have really enjoyed the Murderbot series as a whole, but individually, I don't think I have really enjoyed it. I don't think that's the word I would use. Because up until now, books 1 to 4, to me, book 1 stands really well on its own as a novella, and then 2, 3, and 4 work as a like counterpart to book 1, and they kind of finish a nice arc really nicely rounded. But individually, 2, 3, and 4 don't really do it for me. Book 4 does. Book 4 is so far my favorite in this entire series because it wraps up really nicely. It gives me a satisfying end to this series and whatever, or the arc that was going on in the series. But what I find with this series as a whole is that each one of the books feels so TV episode-like, like not even like a series of TV, just one like 28-minute episode of TV. They don't really give me anything more than that individually. So I was like, okay. Going into this, I was hoping for one that I would have a nice rounded arc, nice and finished because it's a novel, right? I was hoping to get a nice books 1 to 4 Murderbot arc in this one entity. And I guess I kind of did get that because this is a well-rounded, satisfying arc. But what it felt like to me was just an expansion of one of those individual Murderbot episodes. It didn't really feel like something new and exciting to me. All I could think of when I came to the end of this is that, you know, the experience of watching the like Wizards of Waverly Place TV tie-in movie, or the Hannah Montana tie-in movie to the actual show, or like the Downton Abbey movie that was a tie-in. They're like, those movies are never anyone's favorite things from that series of TV, and they don't really do anything new or special. They kind of just exist as like another thing to watch as part of the universe, and that's what this felt like to me. It felt like a TV tie-in movie, you know? Like, it didn't feel like something special or interesting to me. It just kind of left me feeling lackluster. And I think another element of that for me with Murderbot books specifically is that Murderbot itself, the character Murderbot, it doesn't really do it for me anymore. Like, I really enjoyed it in All Systems Red. We were introduced to this very anxious, very insular character, and we still have that with this 5th book, but we're not getting a whole lot of change. And I know Murderbot's a robot, so like we shouldn't be getting any change. But Murderbot is also a character, and it repeats itself over and over and over again that it is a person. And there is little changes between each of the novellas and whatever, but it's not enough to really be interesting to me. And in this book, Murderbot was just angry and pissy the whole time, reminding me very much of a teenager, and I didn't enjoy that at all. I really didn't enjoy Murderbot in this book. I really did not like it at all. So yeah. And like every once in a while, Murderbot will have like a really big emotion, but then do nothing about it and not like go through it at all. I don't know, like it's book 5. We should have a little bit more growth and change and a little bit more excitement to want me to keep reading these books. And I know books 6 and 7 have been published out of order chronologically, so I will be probably reading 7 next and then book 6, but I honestly don't know if I'm going to continue with this series much further than that, because like if nothing else exciting happens, like I know what happens at the end of this book kind of sets us up for a new story arc with Murderbot, but if nothing else really happens, I'm not going to continue with this series because it's not really doing it for me anymore. So kind of a disappointing end to February, but those are all the books that I read in February. I am hoping to add book 13 onto that list tonight with Eldest, but we shall see. Anyways, my friends, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Let me know down below what your favorite book of this month was, because I would absolutely love to know. Tell me about your reading month, because I love you guys and I want to know about your reading all of the time. And let me know also if you read any of these books that I talked about today, because again, I would love to know your thoughts. That was a lot of books that I talked about. We had 12 books this month and 2 DNFs, so a lot of them in this stack. I'll catch you guys in another video very, very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.